3 rings for the elven kings under the sky, 7 for the dwarf lords in their halls of stone, 9 for mortal men doomed to die, 1 for the Dark Lord on his dark throne in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie. 1 ring to rule them all, 1 ring to find them, 1 ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them in the land of Mordor, where the shadows lie.
Hey everyone! Hail Internet, I should say. It's Matt with the Dorklords, temporarily muted there for a moment. The brothers Arda from Canada, all is well here in Chicago. We've got some folks already in the chat. How's everything in Canada, brothers?
Well, could be worse.
The snow's melting. I mean,
yeah. Well, I said it could be worse. Don't depress me. I love the snow. It going away depresses me. I need the snow.
All 30 centimeters that got dumped on this weekend.
If I had my way, we'd have another 90.
If I even knew what centimeters were, I'd be like, oh my God, that sounds terrible. Or very manageable. But no, I get you.
No, it would be terrible.
Yeah, it would be terrible.
Well, for Dan. For me, well, I'd probably throw out my back if we got 90 centimeters, but it'd be still glorious. I love the snow.
All right. Well, yeah, no, it's just the seasons. I grew up primarily in the South, in Georgia, and seasons are basically like, oh, it's really hot, and then it's not so hot. And that was like basically it. But then moving to the Midwest in Chicago, you're like, oh, wow, the seasons change, and there's actually a palpable difference in the months. So that's pretty cool.
30 centimeters is about a little shorter than a foot.
Yeah, no, that's a lot. That's a lot of snow. That is a lot of snow.
11.8 inches.
Well, I'm glad you have survived, and it seems you still got power and all that, so that's awesome.
Yeah. Occasionally.
Yeah. All right. Well, look. Today we are talking about the second section of the Council of Elrond, easily the most lore-laden chapter, the Lord of the Rings. In fact, it's so lore-heavy. There's going to be one more section of this chapter we're going to be covering next month. But today is part 2. We're going to take the chapter right up until just before Gandalf explains why Saruman isn't attending the council, notably absent. But a quick summary.
Spoiler alert, Gandalf and Radagast may have unionized against Saruman.
I believe that's true. The Union of Colors. Quick summary. Back in part 1, we had some backstory from Glowin, Elrond, and Boromir, ending with Gandalf telling Frodo to bring out the ring. Here in part 2, we learn about the history of the ring, the sword that was broken, Gandalf's suspicions about the ring, Aragorn's hunt for Gollum, and Gollum's subsequent escape from the custody of the elves of Mirkwood, much to their embarrassment. With that short summary out of the way, brothers, feel free to take us through in more detail.
Okie doke. Now, the council falls silent and look to Frodo, who's feeling a little, well, I don't think embarrassed is the right term, as it's a little more sharp than that. He's full of shame and fear and doesn't want to actually reveal the ring. And that's a little worrisome because it's showing there's already an influence on the part of the ring over his mind.
Certainly.
And I like these little details, these little touches Tolkien colors throughout his book as he shows the subtle influence this thing has, such as at the beginning when Bilbo almost walked out with the ring until Gandalf reminded him he still had it. And yeah, I'll just do this. And now Frodo is not wanting to show it. He doesn't want to do show and tell. Elrond ends up, of course, commenting once it does get shown in Frodo's hand. Behold Isildur's Bane. And of course, Boromir's got some questions regarding a broken sword.
Right, because now he had this dream. In part 1, he revealed this dream he had, which had these beats to it. Oh, there's a halfling. There's a broken sword. Like, the elements of his dream are now coming to pass. And part of that dream was involving the doom of Minas Tirith as he saw it. Like, somehow these signs would portend terrible times for Gondor. But, okay, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, exactly. And Aragorn, of course, says... the words were not the doom of Minas Tirith, but doom and great deeds are indeed at hand. For the sword that was broken is the sword of Elendil, that broke beneath him when he fell. And I'll just quickly comment that there's almost a rhyming feature to the dialogue here, as Tolkien seems to have been selecting his words almost like he was trying to write poetry here, because Elendil fell. It just seems to me like there's a rhyming structure to the linguistics here. Just something I'm noticing on this read through. And the thing is, apparently the broken sword of Elendil has been, that is to say Narsil, has been passed down through the generations. And I ended up noting down that all the other heirlooms were lost, is what Aragorn says. But there is one other heirloom that did survive, and it's the Ring of Barahir. So we have Aragorn basically proving himself a liar. No.
He was forgetful, whatever it is. This! Well, yeah, hardly an heirloom. Don't take it, please. Yeah, he's actually got his own addiction to a ring. You're like, no, I know what you're talking about. A ring of Barahir. What?
Precious.
You mean the ring of Aragorn? I don't know what you mean.
My precious.
Exactly. Interestingly too, we're going to get farther into the chapter. We're going to be hearing about Isildur. He writes a scroll. He writes his memories of what happened when Elendil died. But he also mentions how Gil-galad died. So the two of them obviously died at the same time, fighting against Sauron. Let's see if I have that quote real fast, because it kind of joins up. Well, we don't exactly know, I think, from any text, Lord of the Rings or otherwise, exactly how Elendil was killed by Sauron. I could be wrong in the chat. If you guys are like, no, actually, in Unfinished Tales, it said, let me know. But we do get an idea from Isildur's own words in this chapter how Gil-galad died. So he says, he's talking about the ring, the wording of the poem on the ring, and the wording is beginning to fade. So he's trying to write it down while he still can, while he can still see it. And so we see, I deem it to be in the tongue of the Black Land, since it is foul and uncouth. What evil it saith I do not know, but I trace here a copy of it, lest it fade beyond recall. The ring misseth, maybe, the heat of Sauron's hand, which was black and yet burned like fire, and so Gil-galad was destroyed. So what that says to me is that Gil-galad was burned to death through the heat of Sauron's hand. I think that, like, the Peter Jackson version has him wielding a mace, just kind of a hearkening back to Morgoth type of thing, I think. But actually, I don't know that we get a textual definition of, oh yes, he was using a mace. I think what we actually get more of a hint of is that he was killing people with his bare hands, that he could literally burn people with the heat generated from his hand. That heat is what made the ring illuminate. It's not really the ring's power, right? We see that the ring needs the heat of a volcano, or you put it into a fireplace or whatever. You need that kind of heat to see that lettering, and it was only due to Sauron's internal combustion engine that illuminated this ring. So anyway, just a horrific way to go in terms of just somehow did he set it on fire? Did he cook him from the inside? We're not exactly sure what, but it says his hand was black yet burned like fire, and that heat destroyed Gil-galad. It's an example of his power.
What we can see from that is that Sauron's being associated with fire as an element. But there is one character of the Fellowship who's associated with fire as well, and that would be Aragorn with the Flame of the West.
Good call, right? You got these dualities for sure.
Yeah, and so you have two figures kind of juxtaposed against each other. Now, Stephen from Red Book is far more, probably smarter than I am, but he ended up pointing out that, I believe it was him, no, it was Lexi. She ended up pointing out that there are many similarities between Sauron and Aragorn, but differences as well, and that where Sauron's leadership is based in fear, Aragorn's is based in friendship and hope, so that they're complete opposites in that regard, even as they are, one's basically a shadow of the other.
Okay.
And that this is something I think should have been, I think should have been a bit more plain to see as a juxtaposition in the Jackson movies, because in the Jackson movies, Aragorn is kind of posited as a counter to Isildur rather than a successor to Isildur, and when he should have been recognized as a bit of a counter to the likes of Sauron. And yes, Gandalf wears the Ring of Fire, and he's the servant of the secret flame, which is Eru Ilúvatar. Yes.
And so there's that sense of the fire, in this case, being used as a fire of inspiration, of a courage and uniting people in a common cause, as opposed to the destructive power of fire that we see emanating from Mount Doom and such.
Now, bear in mind, Gandalf and Aragorn are kind of linked as well, in that in this chapter, Gandalf says, like, my heart tells me, things like that. Aragorn doesn't really use that sort of terminology until later. And in this way, the two are interconnected. Yeah, so Aragorn is a healer and restorer, while Sauron is a destroyer. And Gandalf is also a restorer and healer, so to an extent, and is also someone who, I shouldn't say revolutionizes. He's not revolutionary, but he's like an arc traditionalist come to restore Aragorn to the throne, just as Aragorn is there to restore Aragorn to the throne. So they're both kind of posited as opposites to Sauron in different aspects. So, like, because Sauron has different aspects.
I'll bring up too the parallel, the fire parallel that I mentioned in the previous chapter, when everybody is meeting there in Rivendell in the Hall of Fire, which is what they're meeting there the day before the council, and then of course we get the Chamber of Fire, is where these rings are crafted. So again, there's fire being a tool for good or bad.
And there's also another aspect to this. I've met someone on social media who said that Tolkien was inspired when it comes to his Lord of the Rings, by Norse mythology as much as he was by his Catholicism. And this is very true. And the thing that I would point out is that Gandalf isn't just Othin as a wanderer, but also Heimdallr, the god of positive fire in Norse mythology, because Heimdallr is someone who represents the positive aspects of fire. while Loki is basically the Norse devil. So you have these two forces juxtaposed against each other. So Tolkien's put demonic flame, like the death by burning and whatnot, on one side, that is to say Sauron, while putting the positive flame on the other side, which is to say represented by Gandalf. And fire destroyed Denethor, who harnessed, I would argue, thematically harnessed his inner flame in a destructive manner rather than a creative manner. So in this case, this is the opposite of what Boromir and Faramir would have done. Oh my gosh, we're doing the meme. Faramir wouldn't have burned us all alive. Father, I'm 36. Well, when Boromir was your age, he was 38 or whatever it was.
But well noted that yes, we get lots of fire imagery for good or ill, and we also get the sense of Aule and the servants of Aule, and the idea of technology is it evil in and of itself? No, it's a tool that seems to be potentially used to the motivations of those who wield that power. And so in this case, it's fire is being used to accentuate the personalities of those who wield it, perhaps. Is one way to put it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And of course, we get the excellent poem, which, do you want to read it?
Oh, let me go. Sorry, I jumped back to the previous chapter. Now I got to go back. What are we talking about? The all that gold does not glitter? Is that the one we're talking about?
Yep.
All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. From the ashes, a fire shall be woken. A light from the shadows shall spring. Renewed shall be blade that was broken. The crownless again shall be king.
And this is Bilbo who stands up and shouts this out because Boromir ended up doubting. And this is where this is a great little poem that shows the amount of faith Bilbo has in Aragorn. And where was it? You've got Bilbo who does end up whispering to Frodo, I made that up myself for the Dunedain a long time ago when he first told me about himself. I almost wish that my adventures were not over and that I could go with him when his day comes. And of course, Aragorn's touched and forgives Boromir his doubt. But the interesting thing is that Bilbo's already annoyed at Boromir. Yes.
Bilbo, a good judge of character. It's like da-da-da. Anyway.
But I would argue to an extent, Boromir's role in chapters like this is the same as, I think it's St. Thomas from the Bible, where, the doubter, who doubts and doubts and doubts, and who he doesn't believe Jesus' return until he can put his hands through the holes.
Let's face it. Yeah, if you were to put yourself in Boromir's shoes,
you doubt too.
You show up. If somebody claims to be the heir of Isildur and is, has the trappings and all the things, but you're like, well, that could be manufactured. I can imagine you'd almost be too gullible to be like, yep, I'm in. So I get the fact that he would be. All right, hold on.
The doubting aspect is something I was praising this characterization for. And it shows that Tolkien knows how people will think, and that the most natural response would be, nonsense. You're not who you say you are. But of course, I do like the what Aragorn comments. Little do I resemble the figures of Elendil and Isildur as they stand carved in their majesty in the halls of a Denethor. And right there we know that, there's statues of Elendil and Isildur in the halls of Denethor. And of course, he points out that he is the heir of Isildur, not Isildur himself. And this is an important point we have to make, is that Isildur is not someone that people look at in despair. Like in the Jackson movies, I'm not trying to just bash those movies. It's just, this is a key point that
big
is
difference, yeah.
Yeah, different. And in the book, people, when they think of Isildur, they think of a great ancient hero, like someone like akin to Hector of Troy. So they think of someone who sought to do what's right. And I think the context between what Jackson, I believe Jackson had the line, but how Jackson applied it and how the book applies it are different. Because
Yeah, I think Jackson was attempting to
cast shade.
show, hey, look, here's this line has a flaw in it, essentially. And Aragorn is wondering if he has the same flaw. Can he overcome this flaw to become this great king? As opposed to saying, this is actually, these folks were heroes of the past. And yes, they ultimately failed in some way, but it made them not terrible people. They were, they were heroic figures of their time.
Yeah, basically figures to aspire after and to be inspired by. And that being said, we then get a good idea of how well-traveled Aragorn is when he mentions that he's traveled from, I almost said Arnor. What was Arnor and Gondor. He's crossed, that lie between here and Gondor. Let me correct my mistake. So from Rivendell to Gondor, he's also crossed into the far countries of Rhûn and Harad, as he says. Now,
one note about that, real fast. He does so. The line is, "I've crossed many mountains and many rivers, trodden many plains, even into the far countries of Rhûn and Harad, where the stars are strange." And I feel like there's a little confusion over that line, but I think it's actually fairly straightforward. Rhûn is to the east, Harad is to the south.
Yeah.
I think the confusion comes because people think the strange stars reference are present in both Rhûn and Harad. But I think the strange stars are only referring to Harad because Harad is south of the equator. And so hence there's a different night sky once you get to this, southern hemisphere. That's an
interesting
perspective. And so it would be clear if it just said, "I've crossed many mountains and many rivers, trodden many plains, even into Harad, where the stars are strange." I think that's that when you put the Rhûn in Rhûn and Harad, it makes it be like, wait, what? Are the stars weird to the east as well? But I don't think that's the case. I think it's
I
Harad,
like to think
southern hemisphere.
I like to think that it is the case just because it differentiates it even more.
All right, fair enough. Fair enough. We got to
because I personally thought it was a hemispherical thing because, like you said,
or that they're reading the constellations are different, or at least read differently.
Well, certainly, and in the South, that would be true, right? So, right, I just feel like that's the obvious answer to why the stars are strange in Harad, but that's all. Anyway, but that is people bring up that line sometimes. It's like what the heck? Does that suggest that Sauron has some effect on the night sky? I don't know.
No.
Yeah.
Not at all. But the thing is, Rhûn lies far to the east, Harad lies far to the south, and this shows how well traveled Aragorn is. So that, we might say he's probably the second most well traveled character, probably in the entire genre. I can only think of Conan the Cimmerian from Robert E. Howard's fiction as being perhaps more well-traveled. But in his case, it's because we actually follow him in the short stories into the into the Black Kingdoms to the south of Hyboria, far to the east. We know he traveled into what was it? I forget the name, but far into the Orient and back. And I know he went through Hyrcania, which is also in the Orient. So Conan, the idea is travel the entire world.
I got you. A character like Elric travels to all the young kingdoms, for instance, is another.
Yeah.
But yes, I get the idea. Yeah.
Conan did it first, so he's better.
All right, yes.
There's a reason why Conan isn't in the book, because he'd be able...
Well, I wish he was in the book.
Yeah.
That's what was missing from the Jackson movies. Conan and Aragorn fighting side by side.
There you go.
Against orcs.
Collide the franchises. So we get the Durin's Bane is also well traveled. I mean, yes, he kind of traveled to one place and then just hung out for a few thousand years. But yes, had the rucksack and hitchhiked his way to the Misty Mountains.
He was homesteading down there, just living off the grid. But Aragorn is the best traveled hero in this fellowship, as will be made clear, not just in this line, but later in the book. More so than even Fatty and Durin's Bane.
Yeah, I mean, Thranduil, I mean, no one travels that much, but yes, I get your point. I mean, Gandalf obviously would be your, he's the Grey Pilgrim for a reason. He wanders, and but he's also had much longer to travel. So, in the short lifespan, relatively speaking, of Aragorn, he's done quite a bit of traveling. Yes. Yeah,
although we don't know if Gandalf's ever gone into Harad or Rhûn.
Has he been to Rhûn? That's an interesting question. Because obviously various of the wizards did go to the east. Anyway, but yeah, good call. But yeah, so we get Boromir is basically convinced-ish. We don't, it seems like he's ultimately like pacified by the fact that, okay, yes, this is my dream. Okay, I see the elements of my dream are here before me. And then we get like we start to get the history of the ring. Like, okay, what are the steps? Where has the ring been since it was claimed by Isildur? And we get Bilbo talking about the riddles of the dark and all that.
But we still get more of the Aragorn bragging.
Oh yeah, okay, yep, okay.
I love that part. Because he brags that about the Rangers of the North and how they, lonely men are we, Rangers of the Wild, hunters, but hunters ever of the servants of the enemy, for they are found in many places, not in Mordor only. And he points out that, they tend to hunt evil things that not even strong walls and bright swords can keep out. And
yeah, he's kind of suggesting like, hey, if it wasn't for us, you guys would have a lot bigger problems than you do now.
Yeah, that's exactly what he's doing, and he's basically excuse me, telling Boromir a little gratitude, though not so rudely. And
there are some definite less than polite moments, even in this section of Council of Elrond we're going to talk about, where
I just mean like it's still more polite than saying some respect, please. Right. Without the please, but he does comment that he's called Strider by one fat man who, if he was to see some of the enemies Aragorn has, it would freeze his heart. But what he points out is that the world is changing, and this is where I found this very interesting. He says, a new hour comes. Now, there's one other book around this time that's used a term of hour to mean more than just an hour, like a changing of the age. And that was in Hour of the Dragon, where the period during which Conan loses his throne and ultimately Zaltatun, who's the Sauron of the Hyborian Age, comes to power and, destroys Aquilonia, is called the Hour of the Dragon. And then the return of the king, so to speak, and the defeat of the Dark Lord is then called the Hour of the Lion. So after Conan, who's identified with the lion.
And since we are on the verge, as we know, of the end of the Third Age, it certainly resonates here.
Yeah, a new hour comes. So it's just Tolkien and Howard using similar language here, with hour to refer to the age. It's really, really cool. And welcome, Chris Krutzel. Welcome. I'm glad you're listening to the reruns. It's a pleasure to have you. Now,
real fast. Sorry, just didn't mean to interrupt here, but you just
ahead.
mentioned the world is changing. The new hour comes. It just obviously put in my head Treebeard's quote, which Peter Jackson puts into Galadriel's mouth at the opening of his trilogy. The world is changing. I feel it in the water. I feel it in the earth. That's Treebeard's line. But so we get this hearkening to the wise among our various protagonists and characters are noting that the world is in fact changing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And of course, he points out Isildur's bane is found. Battle is at hand. The sword shall be reforged, and he swears then to go to Minas Tirith. And of course, Boromir doubts again, and points out that Isildur is long dead, and how do we know it's the same ring? And how has it even passed down the years? That is to say, how has it?
These are all good questions, by the way.
Yeah, how's it gotten here? And he's like, "What the hell is going on?" Basically, he's asking, "What the hell is going on here?" And I don't blame him. But Elrond then speaks up. And it's really interesting how throughout this chapter, Elrond really has a good grip on the entire council. Like, he doesn't need to say, "All right, now, Boromir, Frodo has the talking ball," or like the talking bear.
Yeah, he's a good facilitator. He kind of does it without being really obvious about it. But yes, Joe points out, Bilbo's like, "Not now, it's time for lunch." He kind of like, the sun's coming up. Hey, anyway, yeah.
But Elrond is able to do this in a council full of such, Homeric heroes. It shows the kind of leadership quality and respect that he inspires in those around him. He's not the lesser, but the equal, almost the greater of some of these men and these people and whatnot. So it's a really fascinating point about the character that, he's from another age, but no one even thinks to question or doubt him. Although at the same time, he can't help but tease Bilbo. And Bilbo, of course, wants to break for lunch. Or is this third or fourth breakfast? They all blur together.
That's right. 11sies. Yeah.
11sies. Yeah. And of course, Elrond can't resist teasing. "Tell us your tale, and if you have not yet cast your story into verse, you may tell it in plain words. The briefer, the sooner shall you be refreshed."
Yeah. And we'll just, okay, there we go. Take brevity, soul of wit. Here we go.
Oh, yes, Joe. Not now, it's lunchtime.
That's right.
Maglor raised that
the man right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But Bilbo then launches into the story. "Oh, great. Now we have to stop reading Lord of the Rings. Let's pick up The Hobbit. We have to read the entire story, recount it, and then we'll continue with Lord of the Rings."
All right, let's go get it.
See, at least that is summarized, basically kind of he gave his spiel and everybody understood it and we moved on, as opposed to literally recounting the Hobbit.
Which, you know, yeah, some are brilliant. How come it spent, what is it, a quarter of a chapter or something recounting the events of the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings? What's wrong with it? Okay. I can't resist these jokes. But what he points out is a very different story than what he told Glowing. And he even asks Glowing to forgive him. Because, well, he'll understand soon enough. And when he's finished, Elrond just tells him, okay, you told it really well. And now it's time for Frodo to tell his story, which Frodo then throws himself into doing, telling about the journey from Hobbiton to the fort of Breenan. And he recounts everything he can think of about the Black Riders. And then he sits down, and of course, Bilbo approves. And Frodo kind of fusses a little and says, I still want to know a good deal, especially about Gandalf, because everybody's curious about what Gandalf's been up to for 17 years. Because there's fashionably late, there's wizardly late, and then there's what Gandalf was, how late Gandalf was.
Yeah, and then we get this, so Frodo mentions that, and then Galdor, character that we're meeting kind of for the first time here, chimes in. And here's a little bit on Galdor real fast for you. So Frodo says, hey, the story still does not seem complete to me. I still want to know a good deal, especially about Gandalf. Galdor of the Havens, who sat nearby, overheard him. You speak for me also, he cried. And turning to Elrond, he said, the wise may have good reason to believe that the halfling's trove is indeed the great ring of long debate, unlikely though that may seem to those who know less. But may we not hear the proofs? And I would ask this also, what of Saruman? He is learned in the lore of the rings, yet he is not among us. What is his counsel, if he knows the things that we have heard? And so that brings up a whole series here of people asking, why isn't Sauron here? And of course, Gandalf is going to explain why. But Galdor of the Havens, interesting character. He's going to talk some more throughout this chapter, but we're not really going to hear from him very much after that. Of the Havens, you can assume he's associated with Círdan. But what's interesting is, so one of the characters sitting here at the council, Glorfindel. And originally, that was just going to be a character that was separate from the Glorfindel who fell in Gondolin back in the First Age. And then subsequently, Tolkien decided, no, that's the same guy. And I'm going to write how that happened. And he was reborn, and he made Glorfindel be the same character that was in Gondolin and is now sitting here at the council. Well, Galdor, same potential idea. There's a Galdor who was in Gondolin, and in fact was the head of one of the 12 houses of Gondolin, the House of the Tree. And he used a club. And in the Fall of Gondolin, he actually is credited in Tolkien's text of saving Tuor's life. So he was a very influential figure. And so we get in the Peoples of Middle-earth this bit. I'll read a little passage here for you, where Tolkien is wondering whether or not to do the same, give Galdor the same treatment as Glorfindel. Is that Galdor that I mentioned in the council the same Galdor that was back in Gondolin? So here we go. It may be noted that Galdor is another name of similar sort and period of origin to Glorfindel. But he appears as a messenger from Círdan and is called Galdor of the Havens. Galdor also appeared in the Fall of Gondolin, but the name is of a more simple and usual form than Glorfindel and might be repeated. But unless he is said in the Fall of Gondolin to have been slain, he survived, by the way, he can reasonably be supposed to be the same person. one of the Noldor who escaped from the siege and destruction, but fled west to the havens, and not southwards to the mouths of Syria. He is represented in the Council of Elrond as less powerful and much less wise than Glorfindel, and so evidently had not returned to Valinor and been purged and reincarnated. Okay, so in that moment, this is Tolkien writing notes to himself. He's strongly considering making Galdor the same guy. Okay, so then in the notes from Christopher, Christopher notes the line, but unless he is said in the fall of Gondolin to have been slain, in that quote, there's an explanation. My father would probably been hard put to lay his hand on the fall of Gondolin, and without consulting it, he could not say for certain what had been Galdor's fate. This, I take it, is his meaning. In fact, Galdor was not slain, but led the fugitives over the pass of Cristhorn, while Glorfindel came up at the rear. It is said he went to Sirian's mouth, and he dwelleth yet in Tol Eressëa. He, Galdor, whether he appears in the Silmarillion or not, must be either, as his name suggests, a Sindarin elf who had never left Middle-earth and seen the Blessed Realm, or one of the Noldor who had been exiled for rebellion and had also remained in Middle-earth and had not, or not yet, accepted the pardon of the Valar and returned home, the home prepared for them in the West. The view of Galdor expressed in this note seems hardly justified by the report of his contributions to the Council of Elrond. And if he were indeed Galdor of Gondolin, he had had long ages in which to acquire wisdom in the hard world of Middle-earth. Here's the important part. But there is no reason to suppose that when my father wrote the chapter, The Council of Elrond, he associated Galdor of the Havens with Galdor of Gondolin. So that was a long quote to say, hey, this guy isn't that guy. But it's just interesting that Tolkien weighed that notion. Hey, are there multiple figures from the fall of Gondolin that are now at the council and are giving their wisdom? But he decided Galdor is a common enough name, and this character isn't as obviously seemingly wise as Glorfindel. I'm going to make him just he's either like he's a Sindarin elf or some such, and we're just going to leave it at that. So anyway, interesting to me, let's put it that way, that we have this potential. Galdor was almost elevated to, wow, Glorfindel status. And instead, he's just Galdor of the Havens.
Yeah, only Freddie and Glorfindel are allowed up that high.
Yep, correct.
Everybody else just has to be a normie or like some regular schmuck from the local gas station. I'm joking. But Galdor pipes up, and of course, Elrond tells him now, well, okay, how I had said, the talking bear or whatever, he's got the speaking ball or whatever. Elrond kind of does that, where he says, Gandalf is seated in the place of honor, so, we're going to save his story for last. So technically, he does kind of do that. So I guess he's got the speaking chair. Now we're going to hear of the tidings of Gloin in the pursuit of... Gandalf points out that the tidings of Gloin in the pursuit of Frodo are proof enough that, what Frodo has is the One Ring. And what we get told is that the 7 are taken or destroyed. The 3 are accounted for. And of course, you have the 9 of the Nazgul. That leaves only the 1. And what's also pointed out is that during the events of The Hobbit, Gandalf had wandered past the doors of the necromancer of Dol Guldur, and that the necromancer was Sauron, who had taken on a shape and power once more, and that Saruman had dissuaded the council from the White Council, that is, from pouncing on the necromancer for some time, until the shadow grew too large for them to ignore, and Saruman ultimately yielded. And the council threw everything it had into pushing back Sauron. And what's pointed out is that Sauron had watched them and had apparently been preparing himself. But this is something that I found really cool, and I had forgotten since the last time I read this book, is that the Nine Nazgul, while Sauron was over in Mirkwood, the Nine were ruling from Minas Morgul over in Mordor. So that they basically had vice-regal power. So this is why, for a long time, we didn't see the Witch King running around slaughtering heroes and whatnot. It's because he's basically been left managing Mordor. And I don't know what the other 9 were doing, because the Witch King is more than man enough to handle the entire realm. I really pity the Nazgul who was put in charge of the HR department. Then again, I pity the HR employees who had to put up with that Nazgul.
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff here where Saruman, basically says, "Oh, look." Saruman said, "Oh, so wait. He's talking about the ring." Saruman said, "Nay," repeated that what he said to us before, that the one would never again be found in Middle-earth. At the worst, he said, our enemy knows that we have it not, and that it is still lost. But what was lost may yet be found, he thinks. Fear not, his hope will cheat him. Have I not earnestly studied this matter? Into Anduin the Great it fell, and long ago, while Sauron slept, it was rolled down the river to the sea. There let it lie until the end." And, Saruman obviously has a lot of secrets when it comes to searching for the ring. And there's a really cool moment there where so he's basically, poo-pooing, like, keep things quiet while I continue to look for the ring. But then Gandalf says, "Then in my despair, I thought again." He's trying to find a good test for is this the ring? He thinks it's the ring. He's not. How can I prove it to myself and the world? And so he says, "In my despair, I thought again of a test that might make the finding of Gollum," which is what the whole reason they were trying to find Gollum, like prove it's the ring, unneeded. The ring itself might tell if it were the one. The memory of words at the council came back to me, words of Sauron, half heeded at the time. I heard them now clearly in my heart. The 9, the 7, and the 3, he said, each had their proper gem. Not so the one. It was round and unadorned, as it were one of the lesser rings. But its maker set marks upon it that were that the skilled maybe could still see and read. But whose marks But whose marks were he had said not? How? Who would know? The maker and Saruman, but. Great though his lore may be, it must have a source. So he's basically saying, how the heck did Saruman know all this about the ring if he didn't read it somewhere? And so it occurred to him, oh, the person who would have known this and is not Sauron is Isildur. And so he decides, Isildur spent a lot of time in Minas Tirith. Saruman spent a lot of time in the libraries of Minas Tirith. I'll bet you there is something that Isildur wrote that Saruman is using as his guide to suddenly know all these really specific facts about the ring. And so that's what leads Gandalf to go to the library.
And do his homework at long last.
Correct.
But, well, actually, I'll say the movie makes it seem like Gandalf was cramming, which shame on movie Gandalf for cramming his homework. While book Gandalf didn't wait till the last minute to cram for exam. So, book Gandalf had far more wisdom and foresight in this regard. I'm joking here. No, but like this is a scene which with Peter Jackson I actually like because, well, it makes sense in the grand scheme of things.
I'll say this: every time I watch that scene with Gandalf sitting around reams and reams of paper surrounded by candles, I'm like, oh my God, there's a bonfire waiting to happen.
Yeah.
This is not OSHA safe. I feel like they should have done something to protect these papers a little better than just open flames everywhere. But
Yeah, I know. He's a little more careless than what Book Gandalf would have been. But what's interesting here is that if you look visually, the visual story this scene is telling
very
you
nice, Shelby.
is that he's read through these piles. Is the idea this scene is trying to convey to you. So this isn't like this is the first scroll he's picking up. This is almost literally the last one. So
right, and there's probably not much of like a Dewey Decimal System or a card catalog.
No.
This stuff is like, hey, go to that giant section. It's the top men Indiana Jones style giant warehouse filled with paper. Go find the thing you want. Enjoy. Yeah.
But the thing is, we're told in this manner that there's been a great passage of time that's taken place because, visually we can see he's been busy and that the candles are a little used. So, this isn't the first set of wax candles he's used up. Well, they're not yet used up. They're fresh, but you know what I mean. But now as to Al, yes, Campbell made sure the TPS reports were done on time. And I had to comment that the two Bob's Nazguls were busy during that time trying to ask and make sure everybody told them specifically what is it exactly that they do.
What is exactly you do here?
Yeah. Someone's gonna you're gonna have to reenact with your friends.
I don't even have a name. I don't know.
With just wearing the two Nazgul helmets and talking to regular employees. That would make a great comedy skit.
Yeah. And it's a good thing Gandalf didn't have an intern bring him coffee, accidentally spilling the coffee and knocking the candles.
Okay, you're thinking of a D&D character I think you once made for one of our campaigns, Miguel, the Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Yeah.
Who was inspired by Mickey Mouse, the Sorcerer's Apprentice and whatnot. Yeah.
But I suppose we can't have Pippin be the intern.
No. Well, no, that would end in Gandalf's death. Like, we don't like we like Gandalf still breathing.
Not a Roman candle.
No. Because we don't need Gandalf's Bane right now.
Okay. I'm trying to breathe.
And I'm trying to keep you from breathing. Like Pippin is Gandalf. Anyways, but it is interesting textually how Saruman obviously knew that the ring fell into Anduin the Great. But what's also commented here that hints at something that was not included in the Silmarillion, but really should have. I got to stop criticizing the great Christopher Tolkien. I have no place doing that. But there let it lie until the end. And Tolkien wrote end with a capital E, which I always took as a hint to Dagger Daggeroth, which is the end of the story of Middle-earth. So that Saruman himself is talking like this is a story. And this is kind of how Eru is perceived as with regards to the story of Middle-earth. He is the author and the conductor of this great opera. And we have to bear in mind, Tolkien was also fond of operas and did take his wife, or his not yet wife at the time, to the opera for Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries, I believe.
Well, obviously, the ring cycle hugely impactful to the construction of the Lord of the Rings, for sure.
And I'll also point out that the Tolkien movie from 2019 did a good job showcasing this part. Well, this episode in Tolkien's life. I really like that scene. And the thing with Dagger Daggeroth, it's obviously inspired by Ragnarok. But what I also like is Now, I've been reading Tolkien's letters again on Instagram, and this is also his Catholicism showing through as he calls God the great author and painter of the world, which is an interesting perspective. It's not exactly. It's not a. Well, I might not have given the title to such a title, but it's fitting. Like, so, there's a lot of ideas here in just this paragraph, and I really love this paragraph just because of the lore with Dagger the implications and whatnot. And man, I wish Christopher had included it in the Silmarillion, but I understand his decision. Now, Gandalf points out he was at fault for listening to Saruman and still calls him the wise, which shows that to an extent the spell is still there. And by spell, I mean the spell of words that was cast over, that Saruman tends to cast over people who listen to him. Because, Saruman's greatest power is not some fireball spell. It's not that he has access to industrialization. It's his words. It's his voice. So I would argue this is Gandalf still kind of being influenced a little. Just when you call someone the wise, it shows you do have respect for the person to an extent. On the other hand, he could be using it in the Norse context where wisdom is the Nordic term for wisdom was also knowledge. So it could be that in a way he's calling him Saruman the knowledgeable, which is very apt because Saruman is very wise in lore, in old lore. What do you think the Rings of Power Season 3 will encompass in terms of Second Age events? Thank you.
I just wrote a quick response there to Jorge, just saying that, I mean, obviously this is not a Lord of the Rings type of thing, but just to say, it's like they're starting the War of Elves and Sauron. The elves will suffer, they'll give ground, and they'll be saved, one would think at the last minute, as it is in the text, by the Númenóreans at the Battle of the Gwathlo. Perhaps that's how that works out. Anyway.
Yeah. And you are a really good communicator. And
thank you, Jorge.
Of the ancient lore of Middle-earth is impressive. More so than Dan and my own. But and I'll just be clear.
You guys know everything about Conan. I'm like, you mean Conan O'Brien?
Yes, Conan O'Brien. We'll put that one in there as a hashtag. Okay. But no, I've not seen Rings of Power, so I couldn't tell you what's going on.
Neither have I.
Yeah. Such is life. But I love how we do get here one of the great moments when Gandalf says, my heart. From the first, my heart misgave me against all reason that I knew. So here, his heart told him he wanted to believe, told him to believe in Saruman. He wanted to believe in the best in him because they were once friends. But of course, they're not friends anymore. Saruman basically told him when he arrived, friendship over for all intents and purposes, which was rather mean. I used to teach school kids who would cry when their friends told them this. So Saruman is, in the words of one of my students, who would describe this sort of action as being a meanie, or being méchant, or being bad, basically. Well, I've taught in school, so they're unfriends forever.
That's
yes.
right.
Yeah.
Yes. Much like, Galadriel Feanor.
Sorry. I'm fond of kids I used to teach, so I'm fond of them because it's just funny sometimes.
I've actually got I've got a longer section from Unfinished Tales that goes into the relationship between Saruman and Gandalf. How about finish up the section here you're talking about, and then I'll reinforce the idea that those guys do not like each other. They are unfriends forever. That
was 17 years before, and Gandalf then confided in Aragorn, and then we get the events of the hunt for Gollum. Go, Matt.
All right. So, obviously, as Gandalf is talking here to the council, bless you.
Sorry about that.
He is well aware that Sauron has betrayed them, and him in particular. But we get the notion from the text that in some ways that up to that moment, while he doesn't necessarily care for Saruman, he didn't suspect treachery on behalf of the White Wizard until he, as we'll find out in section 3 next month, when Radagast comes and says, hey, you should go see Saruman, and Gandalf goes there in good faith. I don't think Gandalf is going there assuming he's going to get captured. There's an interesting passage in the Unfinished Tales that kind of contradicts this reality of, I don't suspect Saruman of being a terrible person. Though I suppose the events of this Lord of the Rings would supersede Unfinished Tales in terms of canonical, preference. Passage is a little long, but I'm going to read it because A, it's on point, and B, it's a great conversation between these two individuals who can barely contain the disdain for each other. And we don't get we get a little bit of conversation later in this chapter between Gandalf and Saruman, but ultimately we don't get a ton of conversations. We get the conversation between them when Saruman is defeated and he's, trapped in Orthanc. But again, a handful of times when they actually talk. And this is one of them. It's in the Unfinished Tales. Now, because of his dislike and fear, in the later days, Saruman avoided Gandalf, and they seldom met, except at the assemblies of the White Council. Oh, I got a little White Council picture here. There we go. It was at the Great Council held in 2851 that the Halfling's Leaf was first spoken of. And the matter was noted with amusement at the time, though it was afterwards remembered in a different light. The council met in Rivendell, and Gandalf sat apart, silent but smoking prodigiously, a thing he had never done before on such an occasion. While Saruman spoke against him and urged that, contrary to Gandalf's advice, Dol Guldur should not be molested. Both the silence and the smoke seemed greatly to annoy Saruman, and before the council dispersed, he said to Gandalf, when weighty matters are in debate, Mithrandir, I wonder a little that you should play with your toys of fire and smoke, while others are in earnest speech. But Gandalf laughed and replied, you would not wonder if you used this herb yourself. You might find that smoke blown out cleared your mind of shadows within. Anyway, it gives patience to listen to error without anger. But it is not one of my toys. It is an art of the little people away in the west, merry and worthy folk, though not of much account, perhaps, in your high policies. Saruman was little appeased by this answer, for he hated mockery, however gentle, that tracks. And he said then coldly, you jest, Lord Mithrandir, as is your way. I know well enough you have become a curious explorer of the small, weeds, wild things, and childish folk. Your time is your own to spend if you have nothing worthier to do, and your friends you may make as you please. But to me, the days are too dark for wanderers' tales, and I have no time for the simples of peasants. So again, it's just like jab, jab. Oh, you want to waste your time? Feel free. You were just here to help save the world. Glad you're just hanging out with some goofy little kids. Gandalf did not laugh again, and he did not answer. But looking keenly at Saruman, he drew on his pipe, and he sent out a great ring of smoke, with many smaller rings that followed it. Then he put up his hand as if to grasp them, and they vanished. With that, he got up and left Saruman without another word. But Saruman stood for some time silent, and his face was dark with doubt and displeasure. It was a strange chance that, being angered by his insolence, Gandalf chose this way of showing to Saruman his suspicion that desire to possess them, the rings, had begun to enter into his policies and his study of the lore of the rings, and of warning him that they would elude him. For it cannot be doubted that Gandalf had as yet no doubt that the halflings, and still less their smoking, had any connection with the rings. Keep in mind, this is 2851. Bilbo's not going to get the ring from Gollum until 2941. So this is almost 100 years before the Shires are even really relevant to the story. And yet you've got Gandalf blowing smoke rings, definitely showing Saruman. He's like, I know you're looking for the rings, and you're oh, you can't find them. Look at nope, they disappear in front of you. If he had any such thought, then certainly he would not have done what he did. Yet later, when the halflings did indeed become involved in this greatest matter, Saruman could believe only that Gandalf had known or foreknown this, and had concealed the knowledge from him and from the council for just such a purpose as Saruman would conceive, to gain possession and to forestall him. So you can see, so what they're saying is, years later, when actually, oh yeah, now here we are in these times. Turns out the ring was in the Shire all this time. Saruman thinks back to this moment. It's like, screw you. You knew that it was there the whole time, and you didn't tell us? Oh, obviously you had designs of power yourself, which isn't true, but Saruman can only see through the lens of Saruman, and in his mind, that's what was happening. So that's the main part of it. It then talks about the Tale of Years. In the Tale of Years, the entry for 2851 refers to the meeting of the White Council in that year, when Gandalf urged an attack on Dol Guldur, but was overruled by Saruman. And a footnote to the entry reads, it afterwards became clear that Saruman had then begun to desire to possess the One Ring himself, and hoped that it might reveal itself, seeking its master, if Sauron were let be for a time. And it shows that Gandalf suspected him of such. So it's odd in some ways that Gandalf suspected him that strongly that he would, to his face, say, I know that you were trying to get the One Ring yourself way back then, hundreds of years earlier, and yet still he seems almost a little naive when he's like, okay, I guess I'll go to the tower and find out what Saruman has to say. So there's a little juxtaposition there. Perhaps Unfinished Tales is coming a little later, and Tolkien is writing from the perspective of a Gandalf who ultimately knew that Saruman was corrupted.
Yeah, and on the following page, we get Boromir, who lets everyone know that Isildur had gone to Minas Anor, and there lived with Menelil, his nephew, and instructed him on how to rule, and then put him in charge of Gondor. And that's at that time that the white sapling of the White Tree was planted in memory of Isildur's brother. And of course, Gandalf mentions that he wrote a scroll down, and that Gandalf ended up reading it. It's kind of rude to read a guy's journal, but desperate times call for desperate times. They can't exactly wait for Isildur's permission. So
let's pick the lock to that diary.
Yeah. And
that's right.
And in it, we find out that, well, the ring tends to scorch and burn the hand that possesses it. And, of course, we also get the interesting fact that the script in question on the ring is fashioned in the Elven script of Eregion. So for, who was it? George? This is your Rings of Power reference here, I believe. And, of course, the tongue in which this ring is, the lettering is written in is that of the Blackland, or that of Mordor. And we find out, of course, Gil-galad was slain by fire. And
It's, now that I think about it, it's a counterweight to, well, someone who dies at the end of this book in due to fire. So Tolkien's really reusing the elements and using them in a thematic way and to strengthen the motifs of his story. It's really interesting. I know I keep using that word. It's just, this book is boatloads of fun. I'll just Zilsla. And of course, we have references to the Dead Marshes, which I'll run to bat and say that they were suitably horrifying in the Peter Jackson movie. So kudos to him on that one.
Yep. Well visualized.
Yeah. I'm not the biggest fan of those movies, but the Dead Marshes was a part which, honestly, I saw as a little kid, and I remember being horror struck. And then as an adult, when I was able to sit down and watch it, it was one of the few parts I was impressed by. So, yeah, it's a great part. And of course, we find out that, but before that, we have Gandalf, who, wasn't really keen on speaking in the Black Tongue, I guess we could call it, the tongue of Mordor. And here he is just saying it. Which
is seems like a big faux pas, right? I mean, you could see that everybody kind of gasps, like, what the, Elrond, this has never been spoken here. This is a big breach of protocol, I think, to just go and just start, giving this speech in the middle of this council.
Which really is, well, they probably could have used the censor noise. Beep, 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 beep. Yeah, it probably would have saved them a lot of trouble. But yeah, it's Ajnazg Durba Tuluk, Ajnazg Gimbatul, Ajnazg Thrakal-tuluk, Ag Bozum Ishi Krimpatul. One
well
ring.
Well done, sir.
Thank you. You're too kind. One ring to rule them all. One ring to find them. One ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. Which is the key phrase, I guess, to this book. So
it's the mantra for the series.
It's a great mantra. And of course, the council is still very shaken, because who could blame them? And I like the term how Tolkien describes some of the years that followed after the forging of the ring, the Black Years. And of course, we know that the minute Sauron popped the ring on, Celebrimbor immediately sensed him and warned the other elves of him. So that's another bit of lore that we find out, I think, from this chapter.
We do. And it's also interesting to note that when Gandalf gives that speech, it says, a shadow seemed to pass over the high sun, and the porch for a moment grew dark. All trembled, and the elves stopped their ears. So just the idea that somehow there actually was a physical change, seemingly. Now, maybe it was just to their perception that the sun dimmed, but perhaps those words actually literally had an effect in that moment on their surroundings. But anyway, it's
we have to bear in mind Sauron was a greater Maiar, so it could be that it wasn't. I like to think there was an actual event there, and I like the idea that the elves cover their ears because they're so horrified by the sound of this. And I wonder if it's actually a little more, I don't want to say harmful, but it affects them a little more strongly than it might say Boromir or Frodo, or Pippin or Freddy.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Elrond basically is giving Gandalf a rebuke, and then Gandalf, much like he did with Saruman, turns the rebuke around. So he's just given the speech. The elves are all covering their ears, and Elrond says, "Never before has any voice dared to utter words of that tongue in Imladris, Gandalf the Grey." And then Gandalf responds, "And let us hope that none will ever speak it here again." In other words, that's why we're here, so that somebody doesn't just show up and take over this place. Somebody perhaps named Sauron, who could just run this place and say what he likes when he likes. So anyway, it's just an interesting little, shut up. I'm saying this because it's important. Don't get me with, pleasantries.
Your rules.
Yeah. Your rules.
Your protocol is optional.
Yeah.
Yep.
And of
Time
course,
for protocols passed. Loose cannon.
But we have Boromir who says, he asks about Gollum, and he then goes, "What became of him? To what doom did you put him?" And you have Aragorn, "Don't worry, he's in prison." And it's at this point that Legolas kind of goes, "Yeah, about that."
Yeah, that's a great moment. This is a really fun moment to me, because they go through this thing and they're like, "Look, we spent forever trying to capture. We despaired that we'd never find him." Then, Gandalf went off to the library, left Aragorn looking for him. Aragorn couldn't find him, was giving up. Found him. Oh my God, we captured him. We brought him all the way to Thranduil, where we kept him, and thank goodness we have him, cornered, because I think if he was free, he could cause some real mischief. And thank goodness the competent elves have him under wraps, and we don't have to worry. And then there's this beat, and Legolas is like, "About them, no, I mean, that's why I was trying to talk an hour ago, but now you've set me up to look like an idiot, because my part of the story is, you escaped. FYI."
Which, you make me sound like an idiot. No, Legolas, you're doing fine on your own.
Yeah. Couldn't we have had a pre-conference meeting where I could have explained to you what exactly has happened? You spring it on me in front of everybody. Thanks.
And the two Bobs are suddenly tapping their pens and going, "Yes. What is it exactly you do here?
It's so
or your dad's doing here?"
It's like, you just know Legolas has been sweating for hours, just waiting to say that. Exactly. Crap. Like maybe when they're talking about the history of the ring, he's like, well, maybe they're not going to talk about Gollum, and I could just avoid this whole thing. Oh no, he's talking about it. Oh hell, here it comes. All right. And anyway, we let him go. Oops.
And and good point, Joe. Gondor. In Gondor, they don't like to talk about Mordor, and they call it the Nameless Land, or something to that effect. Yeah, I think so. And I just like how Legolas goes. Tries to defend his people and says, because you have Aragorn who's pretty annoyed and says, "We shall all rue it bitterly, I fear. How came the folk of Thranduil to fail in their trust? Not for lack of watchfulness, but perhaps for overkindliness." It's like, oh, no, it's not that we were incompetent. It's that we were too nice.
Let me explain. Yeah, exactly.
It's like, oh, well, it sounds almost like a girl trying to explain how she got dumped. You see, it's not that I was a bad girlfriend. It's that I was too nice. That's what it was. Legolas.
You had one job.
Yeah, your dad had one job. It's not that you were too nice. It's that you were too incompetent.
Well, and what's great about that is in the middle of kind of CYA for the elves, he falls right into a very good point from Glowin, who's sitting basically right next to him, who didn't get the kindliness that Gollum got. He was just stuck in a prison and would have stayed there until another guy at the meeting, Bilbo, freed him. And so while he's in the middle going, look, we couldn't just leave Gollum underground, so we had to take him out so we could see the air. And Glow's, you were less tender to me. Great point. I mean, it's really, really good point. And then Gandalf has to step in and be like, okay, shut up. If we argue, we'll never get through anything. But,
yeah.
Legolas is just stepping all over himself in this moment.
Yeah, and honestly, what is Gollum, a dog? Like,
Yeah, right.
like you need a like they weren't even feeding the dwarves. Like,
they were. Yeah, I mean, yes, it's a kinder, gentler time, maybe. I don't know,
and
but yeah, they were angrier at the dwarves than they were at Gollum. I think is the idea.
Yeah, and like poor Bomber lost maybe a pound down there, which is a crime. And
but that's just a great moment to me when you've got this.
You got Glowing going, hey,
the history. This is where the cool lore comes all in, right? Where it's like, oh, it just kind of dovetails nicely. Oh, right, there was this moment when Glowin was in a very similar situation to Gollum, and you treated him like this. You're like, oh wow, okay,
and you have, of course, as you said, Gandalf tells him, "Oh, come on, shut up. We're trying to get through this meeting today. Shut up." Like, we'll let him talk, and then we'll bash him over the head over it.
And to Glowin's credit, he relents. Basically like, fine, I get it. This is more important than my grudge against Legolas.
Yeah, and he bows and he shows himself to be a royal gentleman. And you have of course orcs that come on them unaware, which is very convenient.
It's more than convenient for sure. It's by design for sure.
What a coinky dink. And of course, Gollum had already been taking to climbing up the trees. And honestly, what were they doing letting him climb up all over those trees?
And then not making him come down. They're just like, well, he wouldn't come down, so we left him there. Okay. Well, yeah. That's
I can just hear the two Bobs from, what is it, Office Hours, just going, what is it exactly you do here, Thranduil? Because, like, what the hell? And I do understand Robert from Indie Geek, who once said, I have questions about this elf's competency. And with this situation, yeah, absolutely. Robert has good reason to criticize Thranduil. He has good reason to do so. And I'm going to just give a quick shout out to Indie Geek, who is honestly one of the best Tolkien tubers out there as well. Yeah, just like Matt. So in that regard,
way more popular, but
yeah. And you have, of course, the Year of the Dragon's Fall. Wait. Are we in Hyborian Age or Middle Earth? Like, because Year of the Dragon's Fall, Year of the Dragon. There's a Year of the Dragon in Conan. That's the events of the Hour of the Dragon. So could it be this is the same world after all? Where that is Conan?
I guess that would mean that Zaltotun is in league with Morgoth?
No, it'd be Sauron. So, like, they're probably the same person. So,
with Sauron.
Yeah, probably the same person. Then again, there's a black ring in the stories of Conan. So, yeah.
Confirmed.
Yeah. But actually, we'll just have to comment that Howard and Tolkien were inspired pretty much by the same stories because they were both Norse saga aficionados. And though Conan's slightly more Celtic than Aragorn, because Howard was also fascinated by Irish sagas. And that's where really you get the feeling that these two great scholars were enamored with the same old stories and were clearly crafting what one might call the same story in a way. So we have confirmation of Campbell's theory of the hero's journey and the hero of 1,000 faces. But anyways, but kudos to Tolkien for putting the focus on the halflings rather than on Aragorn to an extent. And let me just check my notes just to make sure I'm on track. Yeah. Okay, Gollum escaping. Yeah, because Thranduil's acting like a Thranduil.
I like your notes there on Thranduil Napdragon. It's funny.
Yeah. Causes two major problems. Letting the orcs at Gladden Field slide, which got Isildur killed, and letting Gollum escape. Oh, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about the whole Gladden Field thing being his fault. So we're gonna have we need a box where it says Thranduil screw up. Check box where we're at what, 3 or 4 points for him screwing up.
Okay, I need 3 more to get good bingo.
Yep, the counter started, and we should reach 7 before the end of the book. So don't worry, Dan. You'll get your bingo.
Yeah, and as Joe points out, thank goodness Gollum did escape, because his escape ended up being actually essential to the success of the quest. So as it turned out, Thranduil he was doing 3D chess. Like, look, we need Gollum to escape from this tree. Let's just let him go do this thing.
And there's also more.
Well, true. I did a video on this for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But what's also even more 3D or 4K chess is the fact that because those orcs slew Isildur was redeemed. And Isildur's son, I believe his youngest, got to be the ancestor of the line of kings from which Aragorn is descended. And what's more is that the ring ended up slipping by without corrupting anyone further for a good few millennia, and then found its way into Gollum's hands. So ultimately, Thranduil's screw up isn't exactly a screw up of the Gladden Fields. I'm joking there.
Well, I mean, we interesting. I'll just throw this out. I know, we're focusing more on books than on multimedia stuff, but there is this movie that eventually, I think they've delayed it till maybe 2027 or something. But this A Hunt for Gollum. Well, what we've just covered would technically be the text you would use for The Hunt for Gollum. It's paragraphs, so certainly not something you could carve a 2-hour movie out of. So one would think that The Hunt for Gollum is one subplot in a series of plots that are perhaps what the Council of Elrond, what they're saying here is what the plot of A Hunt for Gollum would be, because I just don't see how you could make an entire movie out of Aragorn walking Gollum through a swamp. Now, maybe there's a clever way to do that, but I feel like in terms of lore, you would suffer once you get past half an hour or so, I think. So anyway, just to say, like, I wonder what material they're going to actually pull from to
unless you finally make a musical Lord of the Rings movie, which, yes, I'm still sore Jackson didn't do that.
Well, I did. I just went to that. Not just whatever. It feels like I just went there. It's still fresh in my mind. The musical Lord of the Rings was a live show. Was terrible. It was just awful, and I regretted every moment of it. But okay. But yes, could a musical version be done that was good? Yes, I will concede that it hasn't been done in this case, but it's out there.
I'm still sore that we did not see. Like, come on, what was it? I know it was Warner Brothers, but we could have had Don Bluth for the animators of, like, Prince of Egypt do an animated Lord of the Rings, and we actually get all the songs as in this book as actual songs.
I got you. Shelby makes a great point that the Hobbit, they made 3 movies, which had no business being a trilogy for sure.
It should have been one movie.
So I fear that there's a similar impulse going with Hunt for Gollum, a limited amount of actual text, and let's just bloat it to 3 movies. Who knows? It's the trilogy, the Hunt for Gollum trilogy. So yeah.
What's next? The Gladden Field trilogy?
Oh, there we go. Look at this. Joe's like, there's an excellent Russian language opera of Finrod versus Sauron.
That's cool. I didn't know about that.
Yeah,
Rock opera.
Good, cool. I'll have to go check that out.
Okay, that's neat.
Very fitting, obviously, too, because they battled in song, so that would actually go quite well with a musical theme.
And apparently the elves ended up tracking Gollum, and because they were drawing nigh to Dol Guldur, they decided nope. And you have Gandalf who says, well, he's gone. And they have no time to seek after him. So they're like, well, But Gandalf has a bit of a prophetic moment where he comments, but he may play a part yet that neither he nor Sauron have foreseen.
Which obviously comes to play later as well. There are various quotes that Gandalf has where he basically says, I don't know what part he has to play for good or ill. Those moments come about throughout the. So he's allowing for the fact that Gollum's actions won't be potentially totally evil. He's not.
Yeah, and Gandalf can't really say it because it'd be spoilers.
He's read the book. Okay.
He's already read the script, and he's decided I can't spoil it for everyone. And of course, Frodo doesn't get another shot. But Bill the Pony, the saga. Oh my gosh! Don't put it past Peter Jackson and the owners of the rights. Like, they seem like they're determined to just stretch every story that shouldn't be stretched out and not recount, like, in its fullest extent, the stories that should be told in the fullest extent.
There's plenty of, if you wanted to even go prequely, again, for me, the mileage you would get out of the Arnor Civil War followed by the arrival of the Witch King. I feel like that, you could do a trilogy on that and it would be pretty stimulating, interesting, exciting. There'd be lots of action, but it'd also just be there's meat there. There's meat on the bone. Anyway, but yeah, just to say,
a trilogy of miniseries. Like, see, this is another reason why I'm a little upset Hallmark just does stupid romance movies now, because they used to do these great epic fantasy and fairy tale movies. Like they did the Arthurian saga from Merlin's point of view. They did the Odyssey really well. They did the Jason and the Argonauts in a way I really liked. And the thing is, what they could have done, like you got, like, for example, I really like the Troy movie. So you have Troy. You could have done something like that for the War of the Last Alliance. Like, that could be a movie, a 3-hour movie. You could have, I don't know, a great series, like maybe 5-6 seasons on just the Arnor Civil War. You could have, I don't know, a mini series just on the War of the Elves and Sauron, or you could have a mini series about the fall of what was it? The Lonely Mountain to Smaug, like, and the after effects with the dwarves, like where how they go to the Blue Mountains and whatnot. You could have had that, but
way back in the day when there was still talk of like, Amazon's it's going to have a show. We didn't even know what it was going to be called or anything like that. I was kind of, just speculating on what might be a thing or what might be a fun idea. And at the time, I had an idea that I thought would be kind of cool, and I still do. That would just be an anthology. It's an anthology series. Yeah. So one week you might be looking at the tale of Beren and Luthien. The next week, you could just choose the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. The next, like, you could find a framework that somehow, there's themes that certainly run through all of those things. But basically, you dwell on a story for as long as it merits,
as you can,
and then you move on, and that they're all of a part, but you don't have to necessarily tell a narrative of like day 1, day 2, day 3. In this case, it's year 1, then year 3087. But it would just be, you get to the good stuff. Just go. Here's the good stuff. Then you move to the next thing. Here's the good stuff. You're like, yay! You don't have to do all the connective tissue that may not be as interesting as the good stuff. But yeah, that's what I would do.
And I'll comment this. Knowing Peter Jackson, we're probably lucky he didn't turn the Council of Elrond into a 3-part movie.
Ouch. Okay. Like I may not like his trilogy, but like I don't want to like hammer him too hard because there were some things he did well, and okay, the Hobbit trilogy was overstretched, and there's a lot of things that have been overstretched, but at the same time, there were things well done in Lord of the Rings. But Tinky Yuki, which part is this? Is she commenting on the difference in opinion on the visual medium is heavy enough to rely on the most abstract of the arts would be grounds for war.
So I guess it's asking how good would the music be potentially if we're talking, and maybe that's even a reference back to the Sauron versus Finrod or something. But
yeah,
right, it would depend on the nature of the music for sure.
Yeah, if it's Lord of the Rings, I was going to say like Disney had great composers back in the day. But anyways, very well noted. Moria would be a good movie. Oh yes. Hello to Honey Bun Empress. Okay, just that username just tickles me. That's a good username. Lord of the Rings lore anthology would make a great anime if the right animation studio did it. Well, I wouldn't want it to be anime. I'd want it to be animation, like a Western animation thing. Because the trouble is we keep going to anime when the West, like the US, for example, used to produce top tier animation. Even Ireland did under Don Bluth. And you look at like Thumbelina, Little Mermaid, Anastasia, Lion King, Joseph King of Dreams, Treasure Planet, like everything of that great 90s to 2005 animation golden age. I feel, people today think of anime, and honestly, I'll actually say this, anime now sucks. It was good in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, but it now sucks. And the thing is, I think that'd be better if we just went back to old Western animation because it's different and it'd take people by surprise if it was that high quality. Whereas anime's gotten overdone and it's not of the same quality or imagination as it was from the 80s to 2010, thereabouts. I know that's a bit of I don't know if that's a popular opinion or.
I don't know enough about anime to speak.
Yeah.
As I'm an expert, I agree. I feel like anime has a reputation of having more mature themes and more. So, in terms of like taking a story that's not necessarily just for kids, but that is, you examine Baron and Luthien through.
But the thing is,
lens that it might be more appropriate somehow.
But the thing is with Western animation is in 2008, like I don't really like superheroes anymore, but you had Under the Red Hood where you had someone murdering people brutally in there, and you had blood, you had guns being used. So you can use Western animation in a mature fashion. It's just people aren't wanting to use it. And it's just that people want to use cheaper animators who all live in, because you don't need to pay them up to wage in Japan and Korea. So that's really the problem I find. So like rather than paying Western animators diddly, we're going to go to Asia and not pay them and get this Eastern animation style. Now, if you're going to have people in the West do the Eastern animation style, I just find it's not it's like blackface in a way, animation style. And I'm getting a little I got training as an animator. I got a little tired of it. And I just think well, it's not exactly blackface, but it's more like, I should say, it's just getting overdone. And there's not as much talent. Like the art doesn't look as good as it did like in Spirited Away or Princess Mononoke or Dragon Ball Z or
now, I'm gonna disagree a little bit here with Tinky Yuki, who says Howard Shore had a good ring motif, but who can remember any other part of the score? You'd hope the last scenes would have some epic music, and maybe
now,
it was
I'm
epic
actually
just
agree with her.
There are several scenes that actually, like for instance, when the lighting of the beacons, that the music that plays for that with the bum And that's also when they ride into Minas Tirith and he's riding up the different levels. Like that music to me is like really, really awesome. Anyway, I've watched the freaking trilogy so many times that maybe I'm not the correct target audience for that. The idea of is it memorable or not, because it's like seared into my brain. But I would say that there were some memorable themes.
I'm with Tinky Yuki here. I actually don't think the songs were that memorable. The score, I would argue, was the worst of the fantasy movies of that era, because you look at Narnia. You look at Narnia. It had a great battle song and great music. It had a great score. I may not like Harry Potter, but it had a pretty darn good score. You look at the Merlin movie. My gosh, it had a splendid score. The Odyssey had a great one. Like from like the time of around like 90, well, actually I'll say 1981 with Dragon Slayer, all through to 2010, you had some great fantasy scores. Like Dragonheart had perhaps one of the best ones ever. But you can.
I agree that there's some excellent fantasy scores, but I would put Howard Shore's very high on that list. But okay, I use his Rohirrim theme at my wedding, so I'm just
Rohirrim is pretty good.
I was impressed. I'll just say that.
Yeah, the Riders of Rohan theme is pretty good. It's the rest that I just find forgettable. Like
I was like almost like standing up in the theater, like get him, Beacon. Anyway, okay.
But,
so Shelby's with me on this.
Like you look at the sad song with Theoden, no parent should ever bury their child. I don't think there's any song playing, but I think there is. I can never remember the song. I can never remember half the score. And this is a problem. If you can't remember most of the score.
Sometimes that's a good thing, where if it's just like, it's so good, it just blends into the background and it enhances the ambiance. But I actually do remember a lot of the score. I get it. It's not to everybody's taste, but I was a big fan.
Yeah, it's a difference in taste between us here. And I think most of your audience quite like this score. So I'm in the minority here.
I think the demographic is going to be people that are like, but I got you. But no, I mean, that's why it's
very
interesting
much
to talk
a minority.
About. Yeah, no, and obviously Tinky Yuki would agree. So there you go. It's good to note that, right? It's not to everybody's taste, and I get you, and you're right that if you're going to do a musical, like I watched this musical of Lord of the Rings, that not only textually it was a disaster, because it didn't even it missed out on literally anything to do with the Rohirrim or the Witch King or the Battle of Helm's Deep or any of that was gone. It was all taken out. So textually it was a mess, but the music wasn't good either. And they tried to use occasionally some of the text from the poems, but they did not put it to music in a way that was satisfying. So yes, you are right, Tinky, in that you could screw this up big time if you're going to do a musical on Lord of the Rings and you take the poetry of Tolkien, but you don't put it in a context that works. It can fail. I'll say this: in The Hobbit, the a cappella dwarves singing was very cool to me. I really enjoyed that. If you were to put that in a musical context, for instance, there's an example of something going right.
Well,
we took the text, we sang it in a really effective way, and it worked. So it can.
There's someone on YouTube who did it. It's Peter Collins or something.
Oh yeah. He does a lot of covers of those type of things of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. His was perfect. But yeah. Robert Denduven. Good evening, DL chat.
To thee, Robert.
Coming in very late. I forgot about this. No problem. Well, I'm out of energy and out of steam. So, anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I think we can wrap it here. So next time we'll be discussing the final section of the Council of Elrond, including Gandalf describing his latest event-filled meeting with Saruman.
And just to make it clear to everyone, it will be hosted on Dorklords as well.
All right.
So
Very good.
Dorklords
I
is
know
probably, you're hosting the entire chapter because
I'm
this is
hosting the
technically-
chapter. Next chapter goes back over to the brothers Arda. Got it.
Yeah. This way,
Here on. Oh yeah, yeah.
this
kinda
way
keep
everyone
it-
knows what to expect.
Gotcha. Good call. Good call. Oh, Nicole Williamson. Oh yeah. As Merlin, that was awesome in Excalibur. But that's what Tinky's referring to there. Oh, Nicole Williamson, The Hobbit. Oh, never. Sorry, I thought you were talking about. Anyway, Nicole Williamson in a different context. Anyway, but
Shelby,
elsewhere here on the Dorklords, I am working on the next Tolkien deep dive into a character known as Lorgan. He's a lesser known but highly impactful villain from the First Age. He's the guy that told Hurin off to his face. The line, I'll just say the line. Folly and violence and self-hurt are all the deeds of your kin. Fare you ill. Like, ooh, fare you ill. Come on now. Anyway, so that's Lorgan. I'm working on that. But also in the non-Tolkien realm, my good friend Paul and I are covering the incredible sci-fi series Severance. I highly recommend that series, and it's quality sci-fi. It's not based on some other franchise. It's its own original work, and it's brilliant, and it's really and it also has a lot to say about modern day. So it's accessible, and it's top-notch sci-fi. Anyway, blah blah blah. So there's that.
Yeah.
What about on the brothers channels?
Now, real quick, I'll just comment to Shelby, who asked if there's any way to contact us, and any of us gentlemen, because you're looking for a book. I'm not sure which book you mean, but I will actually share this video on my brother's Crin channel and also on the Brothers Arda channel. And I believe Brothers Arda should be in the description or something. Unless I'm
I'll make a comment back to you, and I'll get you whatever. I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on Twitter and all that stuff, so you could do like a direct message kind of thing. So
yeah, I'm pretty much on. Well, I'm not on a lot of social media, but I will post. Let me see. Let me find my posts. I'm mostly on Substack and on Royal Road, where you got a ton of our web novels. There, I just made a comment on Brothers Arda, where I've got the post. And Shelby, you can. You prefer to contact by email? Okay, in that case, let me see. How might I?
I'll send mine, and then Shelby, you can contact me, and I'll share it with the brothers. How about that?
Yeah, you can then share our email with Shelby. I hope this is acceptable, Shelby.
So what else have you guys got going on your channel?
Well, we're over on Royal Road, where you can find us under Brothers Crin, and we write all manner of web novels, and no Fatty Bulgur mentions, sadly.
But we did mention him verbally, Robert. So we did get in some Predator references on your behalf.
Yeah.
So there you go. We honored you. We honored you with some Predator. Is the ultimate hero of the story references.
Okay. Yeah, and as to hope we'll be able to cover any concerns you have, Shelby. So, but as to the web novels we write, it's basically fantasy, mostly smaller tier stuff than Lord of the Rings over on Royal Road as our upper, well, except for the Olimpnomachi, which is basically Silmarillion-esque. But as for the rest, it's mostly and there's Akmanodan and Baron Cub, which are basically somewhat higher tier, I guess. So yeah, we're writing a bunch of web novels over on Royal Road.
Nice.
Yeah, I'll have to
So
share the link.
you guys, you get around. You're active. I feel like I'm like, I watch you guys zip past me on all these like, doop, 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 doop. I'm just like, okay, I'm going to do this video for the next month on Lorgan, this character no one knows. But yeah, okay. Anyway.
What was the Substack address? Well, let me just see if I can access my Substack right now.
Right.
Let me just grab it. You can join the newsletter.
While you're doing that, I will say that I've also got tickets. I'm a little wary now that I got this. Ooh. I went to the musical for Lord of the Rings, and then it was my wife was almost never forgiven me for it, but it was pretty terrible. But so I've now gotten tickets to go see. It's like an orchestral concert of Howard Shore's music. We were just talking about it. But anyway, I'm looking forward to it. But I actually looked it up after I'd already gotten tickets. And apparently there's like a bootleg version of this concert going around. So in other words, the actual version of this concert series is really cool. But there's like a group that's been just buying off of the name and having a much lesser version of the concert. I don't know which one I bought a ticket to. So I'm going to find out, like probably maybe by the time we talk again, I'll have gone to see this and I will be able to come back and tell you, wow, it was an amazing night of the music of Lord of the Rings. Or I'll be like, oh my God, it was another example of Lord of the Rings musical. So no idea, but we'll, just rolling the dice. It was an expensive dice to roll, but I'm committed, so no refunds.
Here, I'll just give Shelby my. Oh wow, I can't even post my email up. Okay, yeah, we are gonna have to have. I just thought I'd save the trouble, and no, I can't even post that. Huh. Okay.
All right. Well, perhaps you can comment back on this thing to Tinky at some point here.
Yeah, I'll do that right after, and I'll post up my Substack and Royal Road. Then I don't know if it'll help Royal Road, but with permission, of course. The last thing I want to do is actually step on any toes. But yeah, that's pretty much all we're working on. Ooh, the Harris Theater.
Yeah, they were just asking where this concert is. It's at the Harris Theater, which happens to be very close to where I live. So I'm like, oh, there's a walk over there.
My gosh, and I feel bad for poor Paul W. Made it to the stream and we're just ending.
Okay. Well, but it'll be here for all time. You could go back and it's recorded, so you can watch it.
Best.
But thank you very much, Paul, for showing up. We appreciate it. Oh, love that. Yeah, but yes. LOL showing up as we end, but it is the end. It's never the end. We're coming back. Do these stories ever have an end? No, they don't. We'll be back for part 3 next month. Thank you as always, everybody. You guys are amazing, and we will see you next time. Thank you as always, brothers, and bye, everybody.